Dust rolled through the small town of Willow Creek like a restless spirit. The church bell rang slow and steady, its sound echoing across the prairie where the horizon burned gold beneath the morning sun. People gathered in clusters near the white chapel, their Sunday clothes dusted from travel, eyes fixed on the carriage pulling up the road. Inside that carriage sat Clara May Winslow, her gloved hands folded neatly in her lap, her spine straight though the wheels beneath her chair creaked faintly as the driver slowed. Her wedding dress was simple but lovely, cream lace stitched by her own hands, with a sprig of lavender pinned to the bodice. She'd been nervous all morning, not because of who she was marrying, but because she'd overheard the whispers. They'd said she'd never find a man brave, or foolish, enough to take her hand. But today she was marrying Eli Stone, the quiet rancher who lived beyond the mesa, the one everyone in Willow Creek knew but few understood. When the carriage stopped, Clara took a breath of prairie air and looked out the window. The townsfolk had gathered, as they always did when something unusual happened. She could hear the murmur of laughter, soft at first, then sharper, like a knife edge hidden beneath polite smiles. "Bless her heart," a woman whispered. "A rancher marrying her? Shame he couldn't find a whole woman," another snickered. Clara swallowed hard. Her fingers trembled on the wooden arms of her chair. She'd known cruelty before. The accident that had taken her ability to walk had also taken her family's farm and, slowly, her sense of belonging. But she'd learned to hold her head high. She lifted her chin now, the lace veil trembling in the dry breeze, and nodded to the driver. "You may help me down, please." The man offered a hand, but before he could move, another figure stepped from the crowd. Eli Stone. He stood taller than most, his wide-brimmed hat shadowing his eyes. The townsfolk fell silent as he crossed the dirt road, spurs clicking softly with each step. His coat was worn, his boots scuffed, but his presence carried quiet power. Without a word, he reached the carriage and knelt beside her chair. He didn't look at the stares or the smirks, only at her. "Morning, Clara," he said, his voice deep and warm. "You ready?" She smiled faintly, her throat tight. "More than ready." He nodded and, with strong arms, lifted her gently from the carriage, setting her in her chair as if she were made of something precious, not fragile. When one of the men nearby chuckled, Eli's jaw flexed, but he said nothing. He simply pushed Clara toward the chapel steps where a wooden ramp had been built, each board polished and new. Inside, the sunlight streamed through stained glass, painting the floor in colors of fire and sky. The preacher waited, Bible in hand. The crowd settled into the pews, whispers flitting like insects. Clara's heart pounded. She could feel every gaze like a weight pressing against her back. When she turned her head slightly, she saw a young girl smiling. Just one, a freckled thing in pigtails sitting beside her mother. The girl waved shyly. It was enough. Clara's breath steadied. The ceremony began. Eli stood beside her, his large hands steady as he took hers. His voice, quiet but certain, filled the room when he spoke his vows. "I ain't one for fancy words," he said, looking right into her eyes, "but I reckon love ain't about perfection. It's about showing up. You've shown more strength than any soul I've met. I'd be a fool not to call you my wife." A hush fell. Even the wind seemed to stop outside. When it was Clara's turn, she smiled through tears. "Then we'll be two fools together," she said softly. The preacher's final words echoed, "You may kiss the bride." Eli bent and kissed her gently, the church gasping in quiet surprise. For a heartbeat, everything stilled, the laughter, the judgment, the pity. And in that silence, something shifted. When they rolled out of the chapel, Clara saw that even the cruelest eyes had softened. The woman who'd whispered earlier now dabbed her own tears. That evening at the Stone Ranch, the horizon stretched wide and endless. The air smelled of cedar and dust, the barn lanterns glowing like stars fallen close to earth. Eli had built a ramp to the porch himself, each nail hammered by hand. When Clara saw it, her heart clenched. "You did this?" she asked. "Couldn't have my wife waiting on me to carry her every time," he said simply. She laughed, a sound she hadn't heard from herself in so long that even the horses turned their heads. Inside, Eli cooked supper, beans, cornbread, and a bit of stew. He wasn't much for talking, but his quietness was a comfort, not a burden. After they ate, he poured her a cup of tea and sat across from her by the fire. "You know," Clara said, "I never thought I'd see this day. Folks said no man would want me." Eli's gaze lifted from the fire. "Then folks don't see right." Her eyes softened. "And what do you see?" He leaned forward, resting his arms on his knees. "A woman who's been through hell and came out with her head held high. That's what I see." She blinked, her chest tightening with emotion. "You don't mind that I can't?" "Clara," he interrupted gently, "you don't have to walk to stand strong." Days turned into weeks, and the ranch began to hum with life. Clara took to keeping the books, sewing curtains, and growing flowers near the porch. She learned to move across the dirt paths on a wooden board with small wheels Eli built for her. He called it her Range Rider. Every morning, he'd bring her a cup of coffee and watch her tend the little garden she'd planted, roses, wild sage, and lavender. But the town hadn't forgotten. There were still whispers at the general store. "Poor man," someone would mutter. "Could have had any woman." Eli ignored them, but one afternoon, when a ranch hand made a cruel joke, Eli turned slow and said, "Say another word, and you'll be finding new work." The man never spoke again. The turning point came that summer. A fire broke out near Willow Creek. Smoke rose black against the sky, and flames leapt through the grasslands. Eli joined the other ranchers to fight it, but the wind changed suddenly, trapping a young boy near the creek. Clara, seeing the smoke from their porch, wheeled herself to the barn. She found the boy's pony frantic, its reins tangled. Without hesitation, she rolled close, calmed the animal, and used her scarf to guide it out. The townsfolk watched as she helped lead it safely away. When Eli returned covered in soot, he found her on the porch, cheeks smudged, smiling faintly. "You saved the boy's horse?" he asked, breathless. "I wasn't about to let a creature die if I could help it," she said simply. Word spread fast. By the next Sunday, no one laughed. Instead, when Clara rolled into church, they stood to greet her. Months passed. The ranch thrived. Eli and Clara grew into each other like vines to an old oak, steady, inseparable. One winter evening, snow began to fall, soft as a whisper. Eli found her by the fire, humming an old tune. He walked over, rested a hand on her shoulder, and said, "You know, I was never much for prayer. But that day I saw you in that carriage. I think God answered when I didn't know I'd said." She looked up, tears shining. "And what was that prayer?" "For someone to see me the way I wanted to be seen." Clara smiled, reaching for his hand. "Then maybe he answered mine too." Years later, when people spoke of the Stone Ranch, they no longer talked about the bride who couldn't walk.